Urban heritage, the Indian context. In this presentation, I will be covering history of the historic cities of India and then talk about how nature culture protection had been part of our ancient efforts, and since days of antiquity, natural and cultural protection had been one of the core tenets and principles so far as the Indian society is concerned. Then I would be talking about some organizations, initiatives and interventions that were crafted during the colonial period when India was under the British rule. After this, we will learn that how heritage for several decades remained something which really talked about the preservation and safeguarding of the monuments or the relics of past of history. But then there we can see a shift from this monument centric approach to efforts to preserve palimpsests and precincts. So, we see that there has been an expansion and elaboration of the concept of heritage and also conservation from mere protection to rejuvenation, renewal and regeneration. So, let us start from the history of the historic cities. So, from these pictures you can understand that I am actually drawing your attention to the seedbed of the Indian civilization, the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, the Indus Valley civilization of India. So, and all of us know about the Indus Valley civilization, all of us had learned about the great developments so far as very important cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa are concerned. Now, what is very important is that these cities can be considered as heritage cities not only on the basis of the relics or particular sites or the monuments that these cities possessed, but also so far as their settlement pattern or the evolution of the settlement pattern is concerned, and because it sheds light and it brings to the fore the living relationship between the city and its wider settings. So, we see that the heritage value is not only on the monuments or specific relics, but the heritage value is on the relationship, on the evolving interrelationship between the urban and its larger settings and infrastructures, and for example, in the form of traditional neighborhood and in the form of water bodies, public spaces, streets, artisans, crafts, communities and their customs, traditions, beliefs, belief systems, etc. Now, as I just mentioned in the route map, the renovation efforts like it dates back to kind of like 150 AD, for example, because this is an example of the Sudarshan Lake and the dam which was constructed on the Sudarshan Lake around 4th century BC by Pushyagupta, one of the governors of Chandragupta Maurya, who was a very famous king, or he is also known as sometimes as the founder of the Mauryan empire, but he also drew his lineage from Bimbisar, King Bimbisar. So, Chandragupta Maurya's governor Pushyagupta, it is from the inscriptions it comes out that he constructed a dam on the Sudarshan Lake and during the 4th century BC. And here you see the image of King Rudradaman, and this is the picture of the Garner or the Junagarh pillar inscription. Now, the Garner or the Junagarh pillar inscription talks a lot about this dam and the Lake Sudarshan, and we come to know from this inscription and also from other inscriptions from the time of Skandagupta that King Rudradaman, after 800 years of the construction of the dam, he actually pursued and he facilitated restoration activities because he wanted to restore the structure. So, it is a very age old phenomena. Then this is another structure which is known as Surjkund, and it is in Haryana, present Haryana, one of the northern states of India. And Suraj, from the name, if you just deconstruct the name, Suraj plus Kund, Surjkund. So Suraj means sun and Kund means water body, right, or reservoir. So you see that this reservoir or Surjkund, it said that this was constructed mainly, this semicircular amphitheater like embankment structure encircling it. This was the brainchild of one of the kings, Surajpal, from the Tomar Rajput dynasty. And this lake, it is said that it was refurbished during the Tughlaq era and by King Firuz Shah Tughlaq, who refurbished it by building steps and terraces with stones in lime and mortar. So you can see and you can understand how, even after many centuries, actually these renovation and reconstruction efforts and initiatives were kind of executed on these structures which were considered to be very important. This is quite interesting because you understand from the caption or the title, preservation as power. So, through the preservation of monuments, I think the kings, the statecraft also could legitimize the rule of different dynasties, right. And in similar lines, the colonizers, the British colonizers also they came up with effective conservation policies, which is totally manifested in the formation of the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, which was established in 1861. And after few decades, this Ancient Monuments and Preservation Act was passed in 1904, and then followed by this the next major act was the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act, which was passed in 1958 in post-independent India. And preservation and power, and you can see from here that this is a stamp, this is an Indian stamp, 10 rupee stamp, and this is I think the picture was also there on the currency, and you see that the heritage elements. So, different structures, important tombs and relics and statues and monuments. So, one can understand that to a great extent heritage preservation, and if you go through some of these acts or some of these documents and laws, you will see that how monument centric this heritage conservation approach was. And unfortunately, the outcome was that many a times it seemed that the monuments just stood alone and they were preserved, but they remained very disconnected from the broader site or the wider setting of which they were part and parcel of. So, what happened is that sometimes you could see these monuments being preserved and standing alone in the middle of like very bad quality or poor condition setting, and where you see the relationship, the interrelationship between these living monuments and the wider settings were totally kind of cut out. So, that is why there are of course inadequacies and limitations so far as this monument centric approach of heritage conservation and protection is concerned. So, now we move on to the larger understanding of heritage and heritage preservation beyond the monument's perspective and lens. So, this particular example, the Champaner World Heritage Site in the state of Gujarat, I think it is one of the very early efforts in independent India. So, in 2005 this Champaner Pavagar World Heritage Area Management Authority Bill was passed, and it is like a class apart because this Champaner World Heritage Site in Gujarat, as I was mentioning, it is one of the early sites where not only monuments or relics as separate structures, but also the entire area has been taken into consideration. So, you see the Champaner archaeological park here, and this is a massive park. It constitutes 6,350 hectares, and on top of that, like 300 meters further are also protected as part of this heritage conservation initiative. So, we see for the first time in India in this particular state, and so far as this particular site is concerned, this area has been protected so far as her natural, cultural and human resources are concerned. So, now we see how heritage conservation then gradually started shifting from the monument centric approach to the protection of urban palimpsests and precincts. So, we also see some of the acts were also passed and some of the acts were revised. So, for example, Amsar Amendment and Validation Act of 2010, where this as part of which the National Monuments Authority was constituted, and this is important because the focus was still on monuments, but again not only on monuments, but the entire area. And so far as several other cities are concerned, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Nagpur, Kolkata, Delhi. So, we see that how heritage regulations were formulated so far as some of these cities were concerned in the first decade of the 21st century and under the provisions of Town and Country Planning Acts. Then the next major program was the JNNURM. So far as urban heritage is concerned, because this JNNURM, it is on the name of our first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. So, this program is Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, National Urban Renewal Mission, and this was a kind of like a 7-year project where several city modernization efforts and initiatives were launched for a period of like 2005 and for the next few years, and ultimately the program came to an end in 2014, because by that time already the smart city program was launched by the India government in 2013. And so, JNNURM program, one very important part was the integration of heritage into master plans. So, as part of this program, we also see design and development of heritage toolkits. We will learn more about heritage toolkits also so far as the HUL program, the historic urban landscape program, and the Indian nation is concerned. We had also discussed a bit on the HUL program in one of our previous lectures. So, we have to resonate with that as well. And apart from all these programs and revision of acts, important roles had also been played by organizations such as INTAC, Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, Aga Khan Trust for Culture, Indian Heritage Cities Network Foundation, which had played very prominent roles in executing some of the pilot projects and in kind of implementing heritage management plans so far as some of the cities are concerned. Now, also we need to remember that in 1991 the government of Maharashtra also became very active, and because the government of Maharashtra in 1991 gazetted the draft heritage regulation act and the committee, and as part of that initiative several sites in Mumbai or within greater Mumbai became a part of the heritage conservation action plans. Now, apart from the national initiatives, India, the nation, has also been supported by several international initiatives. So, here we see some of the international initiatives and support that our country has received so far as heritage conservation and preservation and safeguarding of our built and natural heritage infrastructure and structures are concerned. So, one very important program or like one important funding program has been launched or was launched by Asian Development Bank ADB under its flagship program like infrastructure development investment program for tourism. And then World Bank had also collaborated with different state governments and also this ULBs, the urban local bodies, because by this time we have to know that the 74th Amendment Act it provided power because there was devolution of power. So, during this time decentralization was very much on top of the discussion of everything. So, and it was very important to the capacity building of urban local bodies so to strengthen municipal governance was on the priority list. So, UNESCO and UN Habitat designed and developed toolkits to build capacity of urban local bodies so far as different towns, even some peripheral towns were concerned. And World Bank started collaborating with the state governments and the ULBs to execute some of the most important projects. And apart from this, in India there is also something unique which is known as Industrial Heritage Initiative. So, I will explain it because India is very renowned, and India has a very long history of different industries and industrial initiatives from wool and silk to which is also known as muslin to like copper and very importantly tea. So, some of these items putting a limelight on these items and commodities, these initiatives international initiatives try to kind of preserve the history of a site and a space by focusing and by emphasizing on certain commodities that it also produces. Apart from that, there are other initiatives like, for example, the Mountain Railways of India. So, under the UNESCO Heritage List, this has been enlisted, this Mountain Railways of India, and under this initiative some very important hill station and where railways had an early history. So, like Darjeeling Himalayan Railways in 1999, Nilgiri Mountain Railways 2005, Kalka Shimla Railways 2008, all these railways and the hill stations had come under this Mountain Railways of India program, which is part of the UNESCO Heritage List. So, apart from that, there is another interesting program which happened in 2013 is the Cotton Exchange program which took place in Ahmedabad. So, international experts and scientists and heritage conservationists, they came from some cities of the UK, United Kingdom, so Lancashire and Manchester, and then they had workshops and exhibitions to curate stories and artifacts from the days from the heydays of the cotton mill or cotton industry in Ahmedabad. So, finally, this presentation I think has already provided an entry plane to the relationship between the Hull initiative. We already know about Hull, historic urban landscape, and what is the present scenario so far as our country India is concerned. So, I will wrap up the presentation with this, and in the next presentation we would discuss about the Hull approach and the Hull initiative and India's position and situation so far as this particular initiative is concerned. So, these are some very important references. I would especially request or ask you to go through this National Institute of urban affairs. So, they had published a compendium of best practices in urban heritage management, which has been published just last year. So, it is a like I think 80-page document. So, and this is an open access document. So, please go through it, and you can also go through the other references, but most importantly this National Institute of Urban on Urban Affairs, go through their 2002 sorry, it is not last year, but 2002 publication. So, last year they have also come up with a publication there, but that is on historic urban landscape and India. So, which we will cover in our next lecture. So, to conclude, if I try to cover the key highlights that have been covered in this lecture. So, we have discussed here the history of urban heritage in India, you remember those historic cities, and how like the heritage laws, acts and institutions were also passed under the colonial rule, where the whole understanding was yes, preservation is also important, because preservation is also power. And then we also talked about the shift in perception and measures from monument centric to natural cultural landscape approach, and then we could finally establish the entry plane for a wider understanding of heritage through the historic urban landscape approach and the Indian context, which we will cover in the next lecture. But just one thing before we end this presentation here, I would like to say that why this expansion of the concept of heritage is important, and what happened with this expansion of the concept. So, heritage, from just being understood as built structures, now the broader definition and the wider understanding of heritage, it incorporates and include built structures, natural infrastructures, nature culture, and also living traditions. So, there also has been like broadening or an elaboration and expansion of the of this idea or the connotation of conservation only from protection and safeguarding to regeneration, rejuvenation, revival, restoration and sustainable development.